Hey, this is a special edition of Better Canes podcast. I have co-host and producer of the Fours Up podcast, the Miami Hurricanes podcast, Jordan, with us. And today's a very sad day. What's going on, Jordan?
Um, like you said, man, it's a sad day today. I don't know. I'm doing good though. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I'm doing all right. I was doing my daily walk for exercise. Was probably say what we're talking about now. Edward Van Halen, the virtuoso guitarist extraordinaire, goat of all time, leader of Van Halen, has passed away today. What is this? The 7th? October 7th of 2020. He was only 65 years old.
Yep.
And, I was scrolling. I was playing some jokes on Twitter today, doing my usual goofy stuff, and I came across your tweet. And you know how the mind plays tricks on you. When I read it didn't process immediately. I read it as if Eddie's father had died.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, old man Van Halen passed away.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, no. I saw that it was from Wolfgang, and I was like, oh, no. And it was like a punch right to the chest.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I don't know. Like, I'm from a younger generation, right? I was born in 1993. I started to get into Van Halen probably 2002. So as a 9-year-old, maybe 10 years old. And like, I've always worried about this day. That's probably weird to say, but he was like such an impactful figure because I've always just been very in tune with music.
Right.
Like music has kind of governed my emotional balance as a human for as long as I can remember. And he's by far the most impactful figure in my life when it comes to music. And so I've actually been thinking about how I'd react, how I'd feel, when Ed passed away, and I don't know, I'm not sure it's quite set in yet because like I haven't really felt anything. But I've connected with a few good friends and people that I used to hang out with, listening to Van Halen, and people that I haven't spoken with in a few years, and so that's been a positive thing, is just connecting over those good memories of the Van Halen always being the soundtrack to those type of things.
Right. You talk about the soundtrack to your life. Like,
Yeah.
I guess I was young when Van Halen 1 came out, and
Mm-hmm.
then and 2. I probably like really got into my Van Halen stride with Fair Warning.
Uh-huh. Great album.
Right. And we came out, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, which was Party Central at the time in the early 80s. I graduated high school in 85. So that whole era was my stomping grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And being a young kid and everything, and I mean, Fort Lauderdale was so crazy back then. And coming out of, I listened to Zeppelin and Sabbath,
Yeah.
pretty masculine bands that are pretty dark. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they had their own virtuoso guitar players and everything. But I remember like it was yesterday going to my first like high school keg party in ninth grade. So I would have been like 13 or 14. And Van Halen Fair Warning playing. And the girls were so friggin' hot at this party. I mean, Fort Lauderdale girls are legendary anyway. And they were like really legendary in the 80s. You had all the Hawaiian Tropic models and bikini models and wet t-shirt contests all over the beach and stuff. And I remember just walking in, whether it's like Almost Famous or, Entourage has those cool party scenes or whatever. And me and my boy, like we just smoked and we walked into the party and Van Halen's playing. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this is unbelievable because they weren't like as dark as
Uh-huh.
like Zeppelin and Sabbath, which girls like too, but they like it in a different way because girls don't dance to Zeppelin and
Yeah.
Sabbath, but they
Yep.
dance to Van Halen.
Yep.
And I remember just being like, this is Van Halen? This is
Yep.
the band that Gene Simmons found?
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't brushed up on my Van Halen history in the last few years, but I mean, really, like when I obsess over something, I go 150% at it. And so, in my teenage years, I mean, I literally probably was a historian of the band.
Right.
And, there's some quote from David Lee Roth somewhere, from like 1983 or something, where someone asked him, like, what's the essence of Van Halen? And, he just, he has a lot of quotes where he says different things. One time he says, like, Van Halen's a mix of religion and hockey or something like that. But, just typical weird Dave stuff. And, but one of the things that he says is he's like, at its core, Van Halen is dancing music. It's like they only put out music that you would want to dance to.
Right.
So, just adding on to what you said, they brought a different flavor to heavy metal, if you would classify them as that, as to what was going on at the time. Because, listen to a song like Dance the Night Away and try not to dance. It's impossible.
Right. Yeah. It brought a totally different vibe. Coming out of the 70s, you had all those guitar gods. You had Clapton, Page, Beck, Keith Richards, other guys, and Van Halen like ran through those dudes like Devin Hester.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not to knock any of those guys. Everybody's got their own thing, but it was like they all looked at each other and they're like, what are we going to do now? You know, they did it. They all said the same thing the first time they saw Hendrix. Mm-hmm. Whatever the big scene where Clapton called, I think it was, I forget, it was George Harrison or somebody, or he called Jeff Beck and he was like, dude, we're done. Yeah. Like, it's over. Yeah. And then there's another one. I guess it was probably 81. So I would have been 14. Uh-huh. I was already a very bad kid. Like I said, growing up in Fort Lauderdale, the drinking age was 18 then.
Yep.
And drugs were very heavy. We were all doing a lot of partying and stuff. And I think my second concert ever was Van Halen.
Okay.
So it would have been like 81 or 82.
Yeah.
And I remember going and we're taking Quaaludes and painkillers and all this stuff. And I saw a guy like passed out in his own puke at the Hollywood Sportatorium. I don't know if you've heard of the Hollywood Sportatorium here, but you've been in South Florida, right?
I haven't actually.
Okay. When you get here, you'll figure it out. Marshall, no. The Hollywood Sportatorium was a big box venue, enclosed, with vents at the top. It was almost built like a castle with, I forget what those things are called. It had no air conditioning.
Oh, geez.
So if you know anything about South Florida, all we cherish here is air conditioning.
Yeah.
So it would be so hot in there. So I go into Van Halen with a couple of older friends, and we walk in, and I see a guy like lying in his puke, like trying to get up or whatever. And the event staff, the bouncers or whatever you want to call them, are kind of kicking the guy's feet like, come on, buddy, you got to get up. And I'm like, holy crap, this is the second concert I've ever been to.
Yeah. So
went to a few more concerts, and then like a year or two, Van Halen came back. I walk into the arena, into the Hollywood Sportatorium, and the same guy is like on his hands and knees trying to get out of his puke. And I'm like, is that what concerts are? Like just the same Groundhog Day? And I ended up getting knocked out at the concert because we pushed our way all the way up to the front, of course.
Yeah.
To the railing. I also blew my eardrum out. Not just from Van Halen, but probably like 60% of it was Van Halen because I thought it was cool to be right in front of the speaker stacks.
Yeah.
And I got into it with the bouncer, security, whatever you want to call those guys. And I'm 14. I'm probably like 120 pounds, tiny, and just running my mouth. And the next thing you know, like MMA style, I'm looking at the ceiling of the Hollywood Sportatorium. And I'm like, what just happened? And they're like, the bouncer knocked you out.
That's hilarious.
And I was like, wow, what happened? They're like, you were just kept running your mouth, or you were giving a finger to him and this and that, and he slugged you. And I'm like, went back up to the guy and I was like, dude, you just hit me. He's like, don't make me hit you again. And I was like, dude, all the drugs I'm on, I felt nothing. I'll see you at Van Halen 3. So I know that you, what did I just hit something? An ominous bass tone. So talk a little bit about, you have a Frankenstrat.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So let's see, how old would I have been? I think it was probably 4th grade. So, what is that, 9 and 10 years old? That's when I first heard Van Halen, really got into classic rock. I had been a fan of pop punk before then, like Blink-182 and Sum 41.
Right.
And this is probably the year 2002-ish, 2003. And so I just, I hear Van Halen and am just so captivated by the guitar playing. And their harmonies were amazing, and it just the overall vibe. It was just like something I didn't know existed. And so I immediately, like I said, become obsessed 150%. I'm listening to all classic rock, but especially Van Halen. They were always my favorite from the genre. Yeah, man. So my brother and I, he's 5 years older than me, but so he gets a guitar, and I decided to play the drums. I wanted to play the guitar, but you know how, I mean, I don't know if you have a brother or not, but it's kind of what happens, right? Is like we decide we're going to be Van Halen, and of course the younger brother plays the drums instead of the guitar, right? So I started playing the drums. I played them for a few years. Like we actually got pretty good. I remember, my parents were supportive and stuff and helped us out, get all the stuff that we needed. And I remember we had a PA system, like we'd be playing the song from Van Halen 1, Feel Your Love Tonight. And I was like 11 years old, and I was playing the drums and singing, and my brother was just like, he could hit every note in that song, on the guitar. And like it just went from there, even like fifth grade, I remember they make you do like your first research project or whatever, like they call it your great brain, right? Some stupid thing for whatever. And I did mine on Van Halen and like the history. And for my project, my brother and I set up in the cafeteria of my elementary school. My teacher let us play like a whole bunch of Van Halen songs for everyone. And so like that was my childhood. And then my brother, goes off to college, like moves on with his life, whatever, and left his guitar rig at home. And that's when, I was like, I've been waiting for this. Like, I've always wanted to play the guitar instead of the drums. So like I stopped playing the drums, and I taught myself how to play the guitar from a Van Halen like a tablature book.
Right.
And then and he had like a Kramer 1984 reissue that I learned on, that he had spent all of his money on.
With like the banana headstocks?
Yep. Still have it. And but yeah, dude, I love that banana headstock. But
yeah.
And let's see. Yeah, and then just, as like a pet project, I just decided to build my own. I pieced it together, bought a Stratocaster replacement neck on eBay. I found I'm trying to think of all the woods, because I built it as accurate as possible. I think it's poplar ash, or is it poplar or is it ash that Eddie used? I think it's ash, actually. Yeah. So I found an ash body that was like a the single like a Stratocaster, and I chiseled it out so it was would fit a humbucker. And I'm like,
wow.
I'm like 15 at this point.
Yeah.
And I just handmade it. I had some help from people that like the guy that lives behind me does laser etching, and so he helped me like home make a few parts that we needed to make it fit. He helped me make the cuts for the Floyd tremolo, or the Floyd Rose tremolo. And I did it as accurate as possible with making it functional to that original like Van Halen 1 guitar, because it's the white with black stripes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I put a Floyd Rose on it. It has like the old cream colored Stratocaster tone knob, for instead of a volume knob. And right. Yeah, man. I mean, it's cool stuff. I actually haven't played the guitar much in a few years, but I had to restring it today. And when you texted me to do a pod today, I was playing a very poor rendition of "Ain't Talking About Love" along with the song, along with the track off my phone. So
yeah.
Crazy.
I was playing Mean Streets earlier, very, very poorly.
Can you do the slap part at the beginning?
No.
Okay.
I can just do the main lick.
Yeah, that's how I am. I've never been a great guitar player. I just play licks. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you strung up the Frankenstrat today with a Floyd Rose on it?
Yeah, it took me like an hour and a half.
Did you go string by string?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Like I'm terrified of the Floyd Rose.
Oh, it
So
sucks, man. It sucks.
I just go through like I guess I'm doing pretty good now because I only have two Floyd Rose guitars. But if
Uh-huh.
I break a string, it's going to become a situation where I have to get somebody to come pick the guitar up and like take it to somewhere and have them do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pain. I think that's why it's been sitting on my guitar rack for 2 years with a broken low E string. Um, but I finally just decided today was the day. Like I had to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I strung it all up. I mean, I sound terrible. You know, the strings aren't stretched out yet, so the guitar sounded terrible. And but it's the symbolism, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, I definitely like I wanted to I was like, always into Gibsons and Les Pauls and stuff. And then I started like we've talked about before on your podcast, I got into Charvels. And I think
uh
Wayne Charvel made that black and white one. Or Eddie brought it to him because he was like stuck.
yeah, something
And,
like that.
and then Wayne made the Bumblebee, the black and yellow one, which I
Uh-huh.
think is buried with Dimebag.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So yeah, I got all into the technical specifics of it, not like really trying to mimic Eddie's playing, but I just wanted to see the difference between pickup mounted pickups and
Uh-huh.
direct mounted. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like Eddie took that pick guard off, that Strat pick guard off,
Yeah,
and just um,
mounted it right into the wood.
weren't some of them nailed? Didn't
Oh,
he have nails and something?
probably. It probably was.
Yeah.
I mean, he did all kinds of weird stuff. Like he nailed a quarter under his Floyd Rose bridge because most of them are they go both ways, right?
Yeah.
You can bend the pitch up and then just the traditional bending the pitch down. And so the like original Floyd Rose concept had that on his, and he hated it, so he nailed a quarter underneath it, so it would only go one way.
Right. Now that's a cottage industry. Those guys selling the blocks.
Yeah.
That's like a big thing. I don't dare mess with it. I'm like so afraid to even
Yeah.
tinker with that Floyd Rose because it's actually set up good. I used to have a really good luthier, and he just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Weird.
Like he made a killer guitar for Stevie Ray Vaughan that Stevie played
nice.
on stage. I mean, this guy was amazing. And then all of a sudden, I can't find him. Like with the internet and everything else, like, dude, you went off grid? Where are you?
Yeah. Yeah, I built my Frankenstrat with it doesn't have a cavity there. So it's just like hard mounted, just like a normal bridge would be.
Right.
So there's a natural block. So mine doesn't bend the pitch up at all.
Right.
Yeah. I thought about doing a quarter, just like,
Yeah.
well, I guess if I would have made it red, I would have done a quarter, but just for authenticity. But I decided to stop at black just because the white and black, because I like the way it looked.
Yeah. And do you have the single, like you said, the tone knob for the volume?
Yep, I did that. I ordered a set and then just threw the other tone knob and volume one away, and it just kept the one tone knob, just like a normal Strat. So
Yeah. My number one Charvel now it's new. I think it's a 2018 or 2019. The tone knob has the 10 position takes the circuit out.
okay,
So it's effectively not there.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And then 1 through 9 is your traditional tone. But once you hit the 10, you can feel like a little indentation. And now the circuit's out.
okay.
And
so
then
you use it as like a kill switch type thing.
it's not a kill switch. It just takes the tone away.
Okay,
You know what I mean? It takes the tone knob out of the circuitry. So you just have the volume knob.
okay,
So
I
you're
see.
not so you're not going through the tone circuit. And then the volume knob is a push pull that has the outer coils. You can run it like as a single coil. You can run it with like 1 and 4 or 2 and 3. I don't even have it
a
memorized.
coil tap is what they
Yeah.
call it. Yeah. Yeah, I have that. One of my other guitars, I have a like a Japan-made ESP Horizon.
Yeah.
It's what a lot of the power metal players play. That's why I
Yeah.
bought it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that has a coil tap on it. I actually really like those. You get a very versatile sound.
Yeah, those ESPs, man, those things are phenomenal.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love ESPs.
yeah. So I got it the last year. Do you know how they switched to like the E2 thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got the last year of the ESP standard series before they
Right.
switched to E2. So mine has like the ESP on the headstock, but it's essentially the same class of guitar as what you'd be buying for an E2 for like $1,700 or whatever.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
for a while there, this Japanese ESP factory was just killing it. It's
yeah,
amazing how, just depending on what year it is and what country,
hmm,
where the good guitars are coming from.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like
man,
a Strat built in California, costs, 2,500 or,
yeah,
$3,000 or whatever. And the one built in Mexico is like $900,
yeah,
800 or something.
yeah,
Well, who do you think is building the one in California? Mexicans.
yeah,
Like, I don't get the whole, it's not like, it's Detroit where there's a bunch of Andy Reid looking dudes and they're putting those guitars together, because it's not.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you're probably right. So. Oh man. Yeah, dude, it's a weird day. It's so weird just
Very weird.
thinking, I mean, I just have so many memories. I mean, I don't know. So like we were saying, I wasn't around to like witness the explosion of Eddie Van Halen onto the scene at the time, but as a guitar player, like you listen to music up until 1978 and the guitar sounds a certain way.
Right.
Even the greats, even Jimmy Page, even Jimi Hendrix,
Right.
even Eric Clapton, and these other dudes that are virtuosos in their own right. Like the playing style, like just was a certain way, and then you listen to Van Halen one, and you would guess that album was from 1987.
Right. Yeah.
Like it
No,
was
the
so,
futuristic tone. His tone
yeah,
is so nasty.
yeah, and just like the techniques that he's using, the artificial harmonics and the two-handed tapping and the dive bombs. I mean, no one did dive bombs because there was no technology for it. Like Eddie Van Halen created a sound that then the Floyd Rose dude had to figure out, and he had to engineer the hardware for it.
Right.
Like
Right.
that started because of the dive bombs on Eruption.
Yeah.
You know, um, and I mean, you can read into that. Like, I don't. Have you ever read how Eddie did his old guitar to make it so he could do that?
No.
So, from what I remember, he would use a brass nut and he would file the grooves in it so the strings wouldn't snag. So
Right.
they could, and then he would grease it so the strings could move in that nut.
Right.
And then what else was it? He'd do something else. I think he rearranged the spring tension on
Right.
the block in the back of his guitar, and then yeah, he'd do that. So in the dive bombs, like the strings would just glide through that nut that he sanded down and chiseled out and greased, and so he would maintain his tune better. And then he said that he'd have to like snap it back, so he would go down and then he'd kind of crank it when he pulled up to like snap it back into tune as best as possible, I guess. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so crazy. And the line is so thin. Like, okay, all the virtuoso stuff that Van Halen did and mastered, the double-handed tapping and everything, and so many imitators. But like you're saying, like it's dance music and girls like it too. Girls
yeah,
love Van Halen. But you tick 1 degree to the right, like to the nerdiness of it, to say Steve Vai or
yep,
Malmsteen, and you lose the girls immediately. Like,
yeah.
yep, that's not it.
And
It's
to
not
me,
just about tapping or super fast arpeggios. It's
uh-huh,
much more complex. It's groove. It's everything.
yes, yes, and there's, I mean, to me, there you could never make a definitive case or have a definitive discussion on who's the greatest ever, right?
Right.
But to me, it is Eddie Van Halen. For that reason, like the point that you're bringing up, and to expound on it is, not only did he become one of the greatest virtuosos, but he turned them into smash hit singles, which is like nobody else really did that. Like,
no,
like you said, you listen to Steve Vai and
No
it's like
rating.
it's a bunch of virgins that listen to Steve Vai, really.
Yeah.
And guitar nerds, right?
Right.
But
Malmsteen, nothing.
Yeah. And,
Paul Gilbert.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean Michelangelo Badio or whatever his name is.
Oh wow!
Like say,
yeah, it's just like full page ads in Guitar Player magazine. Like, who is this guy?
Yeah, with like 6 necks.
Yes.
But David Lee Roth helped with that a lot. But I think it's Eddie's rhythm playing. Like if you listen to the way that he phrases just like the little rhythm stuff, like in all the ghost notes and weird stuff that he's doing during the verses of these songs, like it's just mind blowing to think that he's actually probably a better rhythm guitar player than a lead guitar player. And I think that's the secret to Eddie Van Halen right there. Is the dude had an immaculate ear for good tunes, but then he's also probably the best rhythm guitar player of all time. And then lightning fast right hand. I mean, you just can't pick as fast as he does. And then, just whatever. And he doesn't even like play music theory. Like maybe that's a thing, like humans are kind of weird in how they pick up sound. Because like things naturally sound right or wrong to your brain, like I don't know the science behind it. But this dude doesn't play in like traditional modes because he didn't know them. He plays. I mean, they came up with names for what he did after the fact. Like I think they call him like a box scale or something. Is that what it's called? Like a symmetrical mode or something? And essentially, he broke all the rules. And to quote him, he said, "When I play the guitar, it's like I fall down the stairs but land on my feet." Right. Because as long as you start on the root note and end on the root note, it's working if it sounds good.
Right.
And
like Hendrix, just keep bending it until it sounds good.
Right. So like, I don't know. I maybe there's something to that just the fact that he, defied the traditional modal tones that we're used to hearing with guys like Randy Rhoads and Steve Vai that were into a more like neoclassical thing.
Yeah.
So maybe it was that plus being smart enough to just know if it sounded good or not, like, because some people have weird gimmicks like that and they just don't sound great.
Yeah. It's funny. Like all the greats, they find their own thing. Like for all the kids that can play Eruption pretty good or that don't understand why Hendrix was so great. And you're like, dude, those guys made that up out of nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you can sit there with YouTube videos and tabs and figure out Eruption if you're young enough and have the time to put it in. But can you make something out of nothing that makes people just like their jaw hit the floor?
Yep. And I think one thing that's underrated and is lost in modern technology for guitar, because a lot of these guys have like computer modeling tones. They like nobody plays through an actual amp anymore.
No. Even
in live shows. They plug into their laptop, which is plugged into a big cabinet.
Right.
Like what's lost in that is like the attack of your fingers and your picking hand, which I think is very underrated in how these guys get their tone. Like I could play I can't, but if I did play Eruption note for note, it wouldn't sound the same.
No.
Even if I played it on Eddie Van Halen's like on his guitar through his setup, it wouldn't sound the same because like I don't, he had a very unique, aggressive way of attacking the notes that he had played. That just was like, I don't know, like that's nuance that you just can't recreate.
I forget who it was. Maybe it was Ted Nugent was playing with Eddie. They were somewhere together. So he's like, let me see this guy's rig. So he picked it up and played it and sounded just like Ted Nugent. And then Eddie picked up, what's he play, like a 335 or something? Ted Nugent, like a big Gibson semi-hollow body,
Yeah.
and Eddie still sounded like Eddie.
Yep.
Like, and how many kids, I knew a bunch of them growing up that just went out and bought every single thing that Eddie had. The Phase 90, the MXR Distortion Plus, the this and this, everything's the same. And it's like, dude, that's not really the game. It's not,
Yeah.
you can't go buy Devin Hester's sneakers.
Yeah. And like I was one of those kids. Like my first
Right.
guitar rig was, I mean, I could only afford a Marshall solid state, but I had a
Right.
Marshall amp. I had the EVH branded MXR flanger, the Phase 90,
Yeah.
I got a compressor and a smart gate and all that stuff, like just trying to create his tone. And at the end of the day, like you can only do so much,
Right.
if you don't attack the guitar the same way that he does, then like, I don't know, you could always hear my other influences come out when I'd play. Like
Right.
it just wasn't the same. So I don't know, man. But here's a question that I got for you is
Yeah.
just guitar tracks. So I mean, you mentioned the other day that you do like concentration sessions, right?
Yeah.
So if we're talking that, so we're just talking guitar, I want to hear a few of your favorite Van Halen tracks.
Okay. Favorite is going to be Little Dreamer. I just think is ill. Just
Okay.
the tone, the riff.
Yeah.
Then probably Unchained,
Okay.
which is like my personality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like the song is practically in 3D, and Mean Streets too.
Yeah.
They kind of go together.
For sure.
And
That whole
then,
album flows very well.
And I'm also cool with Hagar.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
So I like, I mean, what's the name of the song? Why Can't This Be Love?
Yep.
Is that the title?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Okay. That is up there and has a lot of memories.
Yeah.
A lot of like terrible memories. Because like I said, coming through the 80s, and that was, when was that song? 87? 86?
Yeah,
86? Dude, it was so bad. I was just losing friends left and right. It was almost like it is now because everybody was doing so much cocaine.
Yeah.
And like I hear that song come on and it's like a punch right in the chin. So I got that. Why Can't This Be Love? I like Right Now.
Okay.
But nothing like the Hagar stuff. They're two different bands.
Agreed.
They're two different bands, and like some bad remakes of movies should have just been titled something else, and then it would have actually been a better movie. But so many people were so invested in Van Halen that they just rejected Van Hagar.
Yeah.
When the Hagar stuff is actually pretty good. Like I watched that, I'm sure you saw it. It was like an hour or 2 hour documentary on Van Halen. And I was like sick after watching it because I didn't want to know all that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to know how much of a dildo that David Lee Roth was.
Yeah.
Like you could tell, like the moment he got free of Eddie, he went and did that gigolo stuff. And, I mean, he wanted to be like vaudeville with those pants and all this, and I was never really into it. MTV was huge then or whatever.
Yeah.
But you were like, God, could you imagine those sessions where Eddie wants to do this and David Lee Roth wants to sing Sinatra?
Yeah. Yeah, that tension I think really created something magical with Van Halen though, because I mean,
right, it's always like that.
Yeah, because I was reading, so they poached David Lee Roth from a local LA band that was called like Red Ball Jet or something, and I'm pretty sure they had like a trumpet player or something. Like they were hardly a rock band,
right.
like just doing weird David Lee Roth stuff. And I think he's always had that energy. I mean, you listen to songs like Ice Cream Man or like The Full Bug, which I
ain't got nobody.
Yeah, David Lee Roth, he added a really weird vibe.
I mean, he got the most out of one note of anybody.
Yeah.
Like he has no range.
Yeah. And and just his swagger. Like you listen to Take Your Whiskey Home or I'm trying to think, like Women and Children First is full of weird songs like that,
Right.
but they're all good though.
Oh, I got to push one back into the top five,
Mhm.
which has no David Lee Roth in it,
Okay.
and that is Intruder,
Oh yeah.
which is like very cinematic to me. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like you can
Yeah.
close your eyes, and I don't know what you think of. It sounds like somebody's tied up and they're gagged and they're
Yep.
screaming, and
Yep.
then now it sounds like a scared horse. Like,
Yeah.
sheesh.
And then it goes right into Pretty Woman.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear, which direction Van Halen went if they had a different singer from the get-go. Say that, like it all lined up that they just had Sebastian Bach from the get-go, or something like
Jeez.
that.
Right.
It would be interesting to hear, because maybe David Lee Roth added that element that made you want to dance. Who knows if it was Eddie's guitar playing, which was very melodic, or if it was, David Lee Roth's weird, like you said, the vaudeville thing.
Right.
Just his cadence and his, I don't know. I don't know the right way to express what I'm trying to say, but
And at the time, like how everybody in this generation in 2020 is like all into Drake,
uh
like girls were into David Lee Roth.
yeah.
And
Well, he's a
if
beautiful
you
man.
if you even had like blonde hair to your shoulders,
Uh-huh.
you were in. You
Yep.
were in. And you'd see dudes at the clubs and this and that kind of had the David Lee Roth vibe. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, he's leaving with any chick in here he wants.
Yeah.
Just because he
Yeah.
kind of looks like David Lee Roth.
Yep. I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you or anybody ever practice the jump kick off the off the riser thing?
Me, no. But yes. Yes, tons did.
Yep.
And tons like, dude, just because he can pull off that one-legged spandex thing, don't you dare try that. Like, you know what I mean? Don't
Yep.
you even dare. That's one guy on the planet can pull that off. And
Yeah.
not even like, towards the end there, whatever, when he's losing his voice,
Uh-huh.
like towards the end of the MTV era,
Yeah.
like it's sad because singers and drummers are the first to go in the band because the voice goes and the drummer just burns so many calories
Yeah.
that their body falls apart. But yes, dudes were doing that, and everybody had a Van Halen cover band. There actually used to be
Yeah.
bars here where you could go see bands play, and it's like, the unwritten rule or whatever is like, don't play Stairway to Heaven,
Yeah.
and people had to tell these bands like, go real light on Eddie Van Halen on double tapping and everything
Yeah.
because it's imitation.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
seriously imitation. And
Yeah. And speaking of imitation, that's one thing I kind of wanted to touch on and hear what you had to say about it being in that scene. Is like the overall impact of Eddie and David Lee Roth together. Because you look all around, we talked about the spandex and the hair and stuff like that, and I mean, to me as an outsider, I would guess, looking at history, like that these dudes started the hair band thing. Because all these guys, I'm trying to think of like Bret Michaels and the
Poison.
the Motley Crue dude and Sebastian Bach from Skid Row,
Yeah.
and they all look like David Lee Roth just with makeup on.
Yeah.
And they're all wearing his same clothes. They all have like the feathered hair, and all the guitar players sound like Eddie Van Halen, and they all have the modded Stratocaster just like he did.
Yeah.
And they're all doing the two-hand tapping, and everyone is just like, I mean, I don't know if a lot of people don't even count Van Halen as a hair band, but I mean, if you think about it, they were the hair band.
They were definitely a hair band. And everyone like bent their style towards that.
Yeah.
Because like Whitesnake, they put out like 8 albums where none of them were hair metal bands. It
Yep.
was like more like Deep Purple and blues based stuff, but they got with a producer, and MTV was on fire, and they're like, look, you guys all need to put on makeup And, Whitesnake hit it out of the park for like 2 years.
Yeah.
They had huge ballads and huge hits.
Yeah. Here I go again. Yeah.
All that, with a crazy guitar player that did double tapping. He busted out the violin bow. And John Sykes, the guy, really the brains behind those two Whitesnake albums, he hasn't been heard of since. He's like a recluse. Everyone asks what he's doing. Then you get guys like we're talking, you take 1 degree to the right, and now you're Yngwie or whatever, and you have no girls, and you're only appealing to nerds.
Yeah.
And then you go a little bit to the left, and there were some guys, like, I don't know if you know Jakey Lee.
Yep. Yeah, I played with Ozzy, Bark at the Moon.
Bark at the Moon, got robbed by Sharon, never saw a penny. And his band, Badlands, with Ian Gillan, I think, is the lead singer. I mean, probably the best, like, imitation Van Halen there is.
Yeah.
And then Van Halen has to give a nod to Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Where you had Robert Plant, who looks like Farrah Fawcett.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Jimmy kind of with the sort of the start of the Slash look, like the black curls falling over your face and kind of hanging in the background, but being a little bit louder than the singer. Like, can you imagine the fights? Like,
for sure.
Jimmy Page, like, I want to be louder than the singer. You're my accompaniment. And Robert Plant is like, no, I'm the golden god. Like, you need to turn down. And I'm sure there were just brutal, epic fights with Van Halen.
For sure.
For
sure. I definitely think, from my perspective, that's kind of how I view, because I'm a history buff too. And just the lineage of like the apex of the rock and roll mountain, right? If you like do a chronology of who was there, like it does seem to me like it was Zeppelin and then like Van Halen.
Yes.
Like they forever changed, even though think of how brief that was. I mean, they only had David Lee Roth in the band for 7 years. Well, from Van Halen 1 until his exit. So 78 to 85, that's 7 years. And they put out 6 albums.
Right.
And I mean, just forever changed rock and roll music. I mean, even today you see dudes do stuff. I mean, I listen to a lot of the, the Cookie Monster, like metalcore, melodic metalcore type stuff. Where it's like the death metal mixed with pop punk, right?
Right.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And even still, you'll hear things that Eddie pioneered, like the they call it like a rake, I think, where you mute the strings and you rake your pick over it, and it kind of makes like a harmonic sound. You still hear dudes do that all the time in 2020, and that is, I mean, the first time I ever heard it was,
I'll wait.
Yeah, or even before he does it on, what's the cover track that kicks off Van Halen 2? It was originally by a woman singer. You're No Good?
Yeah.
Yep. The solo in that one, he does the rake for the first time that I ever heard, and it just like my mind exploded. And you still have people doing that in modern music in different genres. And of course there's so much tapping and it's all evolved, but like it all comes back to Eddie Van Halen being like Dr. Frankenstein, like he really is. He's the mad scientist guitar player. He literally took all of his gear apart and made it highly efficient. I mean, he's smarter than these, product engineers that are designing the equipment themselves. And he's just like one-upping them, constantly changing the voltage of his amps, like making patchwork guitars that are, super like highly efficient, more practical. They're lighter weight. They get better tones.
Yeah.
Wiring his own pedals. I mean, he used to make his own pickups, like wind his own pickup coils and then dip them in paraffin wax.
Right. Yeah, like I'm pretty techie, but I am not about to hook up a Variac. Like that's crazy. That's Frankenstein stuff. That's like, wait, you're gonna change the voltage on a 100-watt amp? That can kill you if it hasn't been plugged in over a year?
Right.
Like the power that's stored in that thing can kill you. And you're like, we're going to crank it up and crank it down and try to get some different tones. I got another cool Fort Lauderdale story for you. I don't know if I told it on the pod already, but I went to Fort Lauderdale High School, which was crazy. And my buddy was a huge drummer. I wasn't into music. I was into sports. But we all hung out, and there used to be a drunk that hung out in the parking lot of the high school that, would sit on a car or whatever. And we'd, me, I've always got something to say. So we'd talk shit or whatever. And he's like, you guys don't even know who I am. And I'm like, no, who are you? And he's like, dude, I wrote the theme to Star Wars. And I'm like, John Williams? And he's like, no, I wrote the Star Spangled Banner for Hendrix. And we're like, dude, this guy's gone. Like, what are you talking about? So he's like, give me money for beer. He goes, I'm the world's greatest bass player. So I didn't know anything too much about weird music and stuff then. So he ends up in the band room, right? And their kids are trying to get him to play this and that. And the teacher, this is how crazy the 80s were. The teacher goes to 7-Eleven and buys the guy like 2 tall boy beers on school grounds. Like you'd end up on the news now for that. Right? Yeah. Teacher brings beer to school. So the guy takes liquid paper. Do you remember liquid paper? And makes like Indian marks on his face. And then takes the bass guitar outside and holds it up to the sun like he's worshiping it with the liquid paper on his face. And he slammed both the beers and he hands the bass back to the music instructor. And he's like, thanks. And the guy goes, I thought you were going to play. And he goes, I just did. And we're all like, what a bust. This and that. So the guy leaves and we're like, dude, like, I can't believe we had that homeless crazy guy in here. And the teacher is like, it's such a sad story. Do you know who that is? And we're like, no. And he's like, that's Jaco Pastorius.
Whoa.
Do you know who right.
I've heard the name, but
yeah. Well, he like the first guy to rip the frets out of his bass and play fretless. He ripped the pick guard off so he could get his fingers underneath the strings, like to really yank on them. And he'd be the Eddie Van Halen of the bass.
Okay.
So like a couple years after that, like we're like, it didn't really resonate until he was at a Santana concert here in Fort Lauderdale, and Santana recognized him and was like, oh, bring him up on stage now. Like the guy had a lot of demons, and Fender would send him, 20 basses and he'd just sell them. And he wouldn't have a bass for a show. He'd have to like beg for somebody in the crowd to give him one or whatever. So Santana's like, come on up here and play. Well, security got confused and they ended up throwing him out because he was totaled also.
Yeah.
And he went to a bar that's right around the corner from my house and got into it with the bouncer, and the bouncer punched him and killed him. One shot.
Oh, geez.
And that's when we've all put it together. Like in high school, it did not come together as it did, where we were like, oh my God. Like that guy's the virtuoso bass player of all time.
Yeah.
And when we were teasing him, he's like, I'm the world's greatest bass player. And I'm like, Billy Sheehan? Dude, it's nice to meet you. Let me shake your hand. He's like, I taught that cat everything he knows. Yeah. Dude, I'm the one that taught Sting this and this and that. And then when they had the funeral here, they all came. Like it was all in the newspaper, and it was like attendees were John Paul Jones, Sting, Billy Sheehan, and you were like, "Oh my God, that's the crazy guy that was in our high school parking lot, like begging for beers."
That's
and now
amazing.
there's a big park named after him and a big mural. Next time I'm over there, I'll take a picture or whatever. But you're like, real geniuses like Eddie Van Halen. The word genius like gets thrown around so much.
Yeah.
That no, dude, the real geniuses do stuff that's so remarkable.
Yeah.
They can play left or right-handed and do weird stuff, and they, invent things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a sad day, and we kind of knew it was coming. I mean, there'd been a lot of rumors about Eddie over the, at least the past decade. Oh, he had his tongue cut out. I don't know whether that was true.
Yeah. Did you ever read the stories about him treating it himself?
No.
Yeah, so I mean, I read a few, in different books and stuff, but according to him, he like came up with his own treatment where he'd gargle bleach, and then went to Mexico to find a doctor that would cut his tongue out in a certain way, like part of his tongue. Right. And I mean, he was kind of whacked out for a little bit. I think he got into like meth or something in the early 2000s. Mid 2000s, but and he was like convinced that the reason why he got tongue cancer wasn't because he smoked like 2 packs of cigarettes a day, but because he'd have a metal guitar pick in his mouth in the studio, and he was like convinced that it was like the electromagnetic pulses or something, or like magnetic waves or whatever from his recording equipment bouncing off his metal pick, and like
He played with a metal pick?
Later in life, yeah. Not to start, but at least that's what he claimed. I think it's after Sammy Hagar exited the band. He got into really weird stuff.
Yeah.
Like if you listen to, you can kind of hear the influence on Balance. But he did the soundtrack for like a porn movie in like 2002. I don't know if you
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's I mean, I never watched the show, but I remember, when the videos were coming out of the songs that he wrote. But he has a track called Catherine.
Okay.
With a C. You should definitely look it up, because
I will.
He made a video of him playing in his studio, and he looks like he's so like addicted to meth or some drug like that just,
yeah.
I mean, because he looks like Gollum, and
right.
And the music is just very dark, very I don't know what almost like an aural, like dark quality to it. It's very interesting. But I think it was around that time that he was playing with metal picks, because he got into like Fernandez sustainers and stuff, and I don't know. I think he lost his mind for a little bit.
It happens, and you don't have it like those guys don't. You don't keep it forever. The magic doesn't, has a lifespan.
Yeah. I'm glad that he turned it around, though. I think it was probably so. They were actually my first concert as well. I was in 5th grade. Saw them in 2004 with Sammy Hagar in Salt Lake City. Yeah, and I think it was after that tour, because he looked rough. Sammy exited the band again. He said it was alcoholism, and he said there was other stuff going on. But I think he was alluding to a harder drug that was involved, which I suspect was meth.
And that's not a good one.
Yeah, or something like that, ketamine. Something that takes your soul.
Right.
Because you can just look at pictures of him and you realize that it was more than it was more than coke, right?
Right.
And
coke doesn't really do nothing.
Yeah.
And especially if you have money. Like the big problem with coke is you need a bunch of it and it costs a lot of money. But nobody expires or just totally spirals out from doing powder cocaine. You mess up your nose a little bit and lose a bunch of friends, but not like the meth and this shit that's now fentanyl and stuff. It's just brutal, like destroying you.
Yeah, and I don't know which drug in particular, but it was definitely something like that. It changed the way he looked, and it made all of his teeth fall out and whatever. And but he really kind of like bounced back. They put out that album in 2012, and he got a haircut and got all of his teeth redone and started to look normal. So I'm glad that happened.
They all do it.
Did you ever listen to that album in 2012? A Different Kind of Truth?
Probably not.
It's okay. It's interesting.
I'm going to do a whole session tonight, so I'm going to listen to everything.
Yeah, well, so when you listen to that album, because I remember, because it was like, you can probably tell that I was like obsessed, right?
Yeah.
With Van Halen, and them putting out new music with David Lee Roth in my lifetime. That was like one of the biggest days of my life. And I put hundreds of hours into that album, even though it was just okay. But it's a
Van Halen album?
Yes, with David Lee Roth and Wolfgang on bass.
Right. I remember when they threw Fat Boy out of the band.
Yeah, but it's good, and it's let's see,
what's it called?
A Different Kind of Truth. It has a red cover with like a.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah, and so when you're listening to it, so you'll probably be able to pick out which ones, but they actually revived a lot of tracks from the old 1974 demo that Gene Simmons listened to. So probably a third to maybe half of the album is tracks that they wrote in the mid-70s.
Oh, nice. All right.
Yep, and then the other half is stuff that they wrote together, 2011-ish. And you can hear the difference, especially in the guitar playing. Like his style had changed so much over the years that and Dave's voice is totally blown out
Right.
on the album. It's kind of rough to listen to. I actually think if they would have poached the dude from Steel Panther who does like an immaculate David Lee Roth
Yeah.
impersonation,
Yeah.
they could have kept going, man. Like they would have been putting out just hit after hit still. But
Who's like Van Halen? Like there's just you can't ever redo it, or like they say, you can never go home again. Remember
yeah,
they signed that other poor singer? Was it the guy from Extreme?
yeah, Gary Sharon,
Oh man,
that was bad.
right. Like don't follow Dan Marino and don't follow.
Yeah,
At least Hagar had his own thing
yeah,
and came from like a different place. He was
yeah,
older than them. But Hagar's got to be 70 something.
yeah. I think he is. I think he's like 72 or something.
And then
Yeah.
you go through phases or whatever. There was a phase there where I just wanted to punch David Lee Roth.
Uh-huh.
Like I blame him for all the talking that singers do when they're on stage.
Uh-huh.
Fort Lauderdale, is
Yeah.
everybody fucked up?
Yeah.
And then like doing that between every song. And like I blame David for that because he would talk and like tell jokes in between. And anytime I see a band with a singer, and that band I was talking about the last time we were talking music, which was Steve Harris's son's power metal
Yep.
melodic band or whatever, that kid was doing that
Yeah.
between every song, was going, "How we doing, Fort Lauderdale?"
Yep.
Dude, just do it once and do it at the end. Don't do it in between every song.
Yep. Yeah, I saw Van Halen again in 2013 with David Lee Roth. Um and yeah, I mean that dude, he was telling stories from like 1981 where they were like on a tour bus in Scotland and it just none of it made sense. Like he was talking for like 20 minutes telling us this one story about him being, just on drugs and alcohol and like laying on the bench of this bus and looking at Edinburgh Castle upside down because his
Right.
head's hanging off the seat, and he just like you're just like, what is this dude thinking? Like not even in a bad way, but like what? Like I want to understand the thought process behind why you're telling me this, but I don't know. He's
Then how did you feel about the switch to the Music Man guitar?
um. So here's the thing, like I I love the tone of that guitar. And I think the worst Van Halen album, I don't really count Van Halen 3 with Gary Sharon,
Right.
but the worst Van Halen, a huge margin to me, is the 1987 album, the second one with Sammy Hagar, OU812.
Right.
Like to me, that is just a really bad album, and maybe only three good tracks. And the guitar tone, I think that's when he switched to what amp company was it? Uh,
PV?
it was between PV. It was oh shoot, I can't think of it right now. Um, but yeah, it was right before PV, and so he was still using his Kramer guitars, and he switched to Soldano amp.
Soldano amps, yeah.
Yeah, and his
Mike
tone just
Soldano.
sucked, man. Like if you listen to like Black and Blue, um, or something like that. I can't think of the other songs right now, but they just the tone is horrible.
Looking up the album right now.
I just can't do it, man. Um, yeah, it just sounds so muddy and like he's playing into a tin can in the room next door, and
Oh
you
yeah.
just there's no articulation, and it just yeah, it's really a horrible album, and I think it starts with a really bad guitar tone.
Yeah.
So when he comes out the next album playing through a PV amp, the Music Man guitar in For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, it was, I mean, I mean, obviously I wasn't there, but in retrospect, like it's a breath of fresh air.
What
It's
year's
a
that?
1991.
Pound Cake, strong.
Yes, that's the album. Yep, Judgment Day, Spanked, Run Around.
Right now.
Yep,
Yeah.
Top of the World.
Yeah.
That song hit number one. Um, I love that album, and I think his guitar playing, just took a different direction. I mean, maybe to most people it sounds the same, but it's a different flavor of Eddie Van Halen by that point.
Right.
His like licks, because he has a catalog of licks that he always leans on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And those changed.
They changed big time because that was coming out of hair metal.
Yep.
He had to differentiate himself from every other clone that he birthed the 10 previous years.
Yep. Yeah,
Whether,
and I think
Mick Mars or whoever.
You know what song? So I was actually listening to this the other day. For some reason, I was inspired to do like a concentration session, listening to Eddie Van Halen playing the guitar. I think I was showing my girlfriend, because she has no idea about any of this stuff. But the song on Balance, Amsterdam, is one of the best guitar tracks of all time.
Okay.
And like, I think the song is okay. It kind of like showcases like some of the more annoying things that Sammy Hagar does, right?
Yeah.
But if you just listen to the guitar,
what song is it?
Amsterdam.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on their 1995 album. Yeah, Balance, the one with the Siamese twins.
Yeah.
The rhythm guitar in the verse, like it just, oh my gosh, it like makes me physically aroused pretty much. It's so incredible. Like that was a song that I've long tried to learn how to play, and I just back to the not having the right attack and the right feel, like I just couldn't get it to sound the way I wanted it, even though I was hitting every note.
Right.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. I highly recommend that song specifically. I think best typifies that whole album in the way he plays.
Yeah, I'm just making a playlist as we go along here. I'm just keep adding plus.
Yep. Yeah, and then another one. I actually think the three. Well, I mean, it seems like Van Halen. No one talks about late '90s Van Halen. And it's because they didn't put out a lot of music. But like do you remember when they did the Twister soundtrack, Humans Being?
Barely.
Okay, so I mean that song is cool. There's some cool stuff he does with the guitar. But then after they released their greatest hits, the Best of Van Halen Volume 1 in 1996, that has 2 tracks that they recorded that year with David Lee Roth that they wrote. Because like he was back in the band for like 3 months, and then they got in a big fight on MTV at like the Grammys or something, and then they kicked him out, or whatever. Because I guess Dave Lee Roth said that they were gonna tour, and Eddie's like, no, I need a hip replacement, and whatever. So they got in a big fight because they're children, they're just grown children.
Yeah.
And kicked him out. But the songs Can't Get This Stuff No More and Me Wise Magic. Just the guitar playing just blows my mind, man.
Okay, this is 2 at the end of the album.
Yep, tracks 16 and 17.
Yeah.
And I think it's Me Wise Magic. He got into something called a trans trem, if you know what that is.
No.
He uses it, I guess he used it a little bit in the mid-'80s too. He used it on like summer nights. But what it is, it's where you can like change the pitch like a Floyd Rose, but then you can lock it in. So you're changing the key of your guitar mid-song, right? So you can push it down so it's like lowering the pitch, or you can pull it up so it's raising the pitch by like I don't know, like 3 notes or whatever.
Yeah.
And then lock it in so you're all of a sudden playing in like a D standard or, C standard or whatever.
Oh, wow. Like a moving capo.
Yeah, essentially. That's exactly what it is. And he does that on Me Wise Magic, and there's some cool stuff. I used to play that in my room, and I'd have to like hurry and snap on a capo, or
Right.
like at a certain part, trying to get it right.
Yeah.
Just I think I dinged the neck of that Kramer reissue with the banana headstock one time that I was trying to get the timing right to snap the capo on,
Yeah.
and man, I was so pissed.
What about what is that thing called? A detuner? You ever
Yep,
use that?
yeah, I have one on my Frankenstrat.
Okay.
They're they're solid.
Yeah.
It's not mine isn't precise. I usually have to use the fine tuners a little bit
Yeah.
to get it to be in tune when I use it, but it gets the job done.
Yeah. And
So
getting back to you saying the attack and the transience of how he plays, and especially like Hendrix and the blues guys that really played on crappy guitars,
mhm.
those guys can actually like retune with their left hand as they play. Like the way they shape their chords, like, okay, this one needs to be a little sharper, this one needs to be a little flatter, so the chord's in tune. Like that blows my mind. Like I can
Yeah,
barely tune the thing. Like I'm constantly fiddling, with the tuner or whatever, and to be like, oh wow, a guy playing an acoustic that's not holding tune, but can make chord shapes and knows how to
yep.
compensate for all the strings to be in tune. That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's
man.
real genius stuff.
Yeah, and it's stuff like that honestly that made me like stop taking the guitar so seriously because I was just like, I think I'm a hobby player, you know? Like growing up, I wanted to be famous playing the guitar so bad.
Right.
Um, but then, like the more I learned about it and the more I started to understand the genius of guys like Eddie Van Halen, that I was just like, you know what? I think this is a hobby for me. I I just I didn't have that in me.
Right. And nobody does. Like you can play football and be like, all right, I'm going to do some Barry Sanders stuff. And no,
Yeah.
the guy's got
Yeah.
your flag or you're tackled immediately.
Yeah, you can practice like the no look Patrick Mahomes,
Right.
looking the other way and flinging it 45 yards down the sideline over a guy's shoulder. You can practice that all you want, but it's not going to happen.
But you could drum and sing at the same time. And to me, that's like impossible.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually wish I would have kept playing the drums. Because I was like 11 when I was doing that, and I
Right.
was just getting into the double bass pedal. I actually played in a band with my brother where we played at Battle of the Bands when he was in high school and I was 11.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and so like I was a very competent drummer at a young age. I wouldn't have, I wasn't like a virtuoso or anything or like a prodigious talent, but I was very capable even as a youngster, and I just didn't love it. That's one of my regrets though, because I think as an 11-year-old I was better at the drums than at my peak of playing the guitar. And I just for whatever reason it just wasn't my calling in life.
Yeah. It's tough,
Yeah,
especially now, especially, for the most part, rock and roll's dead.
yeah,
Like it's sad. I
yep,
mean, the music business is, you can blame a lot of factors. You can blame Napster. You
yep,
can blame evolving taste and all this. I think we spoke the last time. I think this is the first time in years that guitar sales are up
yeah,
because of everybody staying home. They're all ordering guitars and from Sam Ash and from Amazon to try to learn. A
hmm,
heads up, I think the entire Fender like college is free, like for the next 90 days. You
really,
can learn guitar, bass, ukulele. Yeah. Yeah, I
that's
think
cool.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
totally took advantage of the 90-day free Apple Logic.
hmm,
And I was like, oh, yeah, dude, I'm not leaving the house. Like, and
yeah,
then, yeah, it's like a $300 program or whatever. And I jumped in, I learned it, and, did some stuff with it. And you're like, now is the time.
yeah,
Everyone has time.
absolutely, absolutely. Did you are so you play the guitar? Did you ever get much into the like theory type stuff? Like, did you learn all the modes and you
No,
can yeah, I didn't either, man. I can't do that.
no.
I don't have the patience for it.
Like I can do, like I said, I like Intruder.
Uh-huh.
I can do like sound effects.
Uh-huh.
I find like weird ambient stuff. I have a lot of effects pedals and this and that, but I could never be in a band. Like my
Yeah.
timing is so bad when me and my buddy jam.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't even get a guitar till I think late 20s.
Uh-huh.
And never took a lesson, and it's sad. And you'd lay on the couch watching the game. It wouldn't be plugged in. You just fiddle on it or whatever.
Yeah.
So I've never like taken it seriously. I liked buying the guitar more than I liked practicing it.
Absolutely.
Like a lot of people, it's more of a, I don't know what that is, greed or worship of materialism.
Well, I think everyone wants the attention of being an incredible guitar player, but not the work that goes into it.
Right. And and not just guitars. Like I acquired all musical instruments, but I didn't, like I said, the guitar was last. Like as a kid, like I always had those keyboards, those Yamaha keyboards and 4-track recorders and then drum machines and all kinds of stuff. And like anything else, like I don't know whether it's confidence or arrogance or whatever, but like I'll pick it up. I can make something happen. No matter what kind of musical instrument it is. And same thing, like just the guitars are just so sexy looking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was just crazy for Les Pauls for decades. And then SGs. Then I went like the other direction and just wanted plain. I just wanted a plain looking guitar. And now I'm all obsessed with the Super Strats.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, my first 2 guitars. I mean, I stole that Kramer reissue from my brother. I mean, he has it back now, but that was what I consider my first guitar. And then I made the Frankenstrat, and then I started to get into like power metal and European metal, symphonic metal type stuff. So then I got the ESP, and then my taste went more towards like metalcore and pop punk and stuff. So then I got a Schecter, with no Floyd Rose. I'm off the Floyd Rose train probably forever. They're just a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And like they're kind of gimmicky, like I'm not Eddie Van Halen, therefore I don't need a Floyd Rose.
I saw
how I look at them.
I saw Maiden last year, and they have 3 lead guitarists, right?
Yeah.
And they all play like Super Strats, Jacksons, and Fenders with Floyd Roses.
Yeah.
And none of them touched the bar once.
Yep.
Like I was like, did any of these guys dive bomb or, do any of that stuff? And like they played 25 songs and not one time did they grab the bar. It's like you just have a Floyd Rose because you're expected to have a Floyd Rose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's great when you have a guitar tech, right? A guy that's,
of course,
you pay to change your strings and adjust the saddles and get rid of all the buzz and stuff.
Yeah.
And like I did take advantage of it. Like I probably knew more of like Eddie Van Halen's weird tricks that he would do, like whammy bar tricks.
Yeah.
I knew more stuff like that than actual guitar licks. Like I would fool people because I could do the elephant noise that he would do.
Right.
Like you turn the volume off and you hit like 3 different harmonics and then you push the bar in and then slowly turn the volume on as you let the bar go. And so it's raising in pitch and it sounds like an elephant, it's like screeching or whatever they do.
Yeah, I love that.
So I could do that. I would do all the, the horse noises and like the, I got really good at all the tricks to make everyone think I was a good guitar player, even though I wasn't. But now I've just like, and also I think Floyd Rose are more comfortable to palm mute. That's just my preference. But just for functionality, I just went to the hardtails. They're just so much more convenient, man.
Right. I've shown it to you before, but I have a Charvel hardtail that I love because it's no nonsense. You just change the strings, it's done.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that was it. It took me a good hour and a half to change the strings on my Frankenstrat today.
Yeah.
I was sweating by the end of it, but
I
that
bet.
says a lot about me.
Well, I also have an Ibanez. I don't know what number it is, but the Ibanez takes the ball end for its
Uh-huh.
Floyd Rose. It's not a
Yeah.
Floyd Rose. I forget what it's called, an Edge, but it's basically like their answer to the Floyd Rose,
Okay.
and it takes the ball end. So
Interesting.
that's half the battle right there.
Yeah. That's
You know what I mean?
interesting.
And it's good. There's people that swear by them. There's people that are like, no, the Ibanez is so much better than the Floyd Rose.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then this is a good catch up here. We needed to do this for Eddie to talk.
Yeah.
And it's a sad time. Thanks for coming on, Jordan. I'm gonna do like I said, a full, multi-hour listening tonight. Have
Yeah.
some beers. I can't do the heat. Like NBA just cranks up my anxiety.
Yeah.
So I'll just wait for the result.
Well, I'll join you in spirit, man. I'm gonna do a long listen through on my own, and definitely text me. Any thoughts that you're having, anything you want to chat about, recommendations.
Yeah,
like
you too.
I love geeking out about this stuff, and it's a heavy day. It still hasn't hit me yet, but I mean, like I said, it's the passing of probably the most influential celebrity personality in my entire life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no. And far too soon. 65 is
Yep.
a young dude.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Thanks, Canes fans. I don't know what kind of artwork I'm going to put up for this. Don't really care. So, anybody that listened this long to us ramble on about this, thanks for listening. And we'll talk later in the week. I'll probably do another preview for Clemson.